Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to today's TribalWise webinar, Modernizing Member Management. This is brought to you in partnership with Arctic IT. Today's webinar, Arctic IT will identify the top 5 challenges in providing services to members and how to solve them. Ensure your data is accurate and secure while enriching the member service experience. Again, special thanks to today's webinar partner, Arctic IT. Today's presenters are Brian Schmidt, Sales Solution Architect for Arctic IT. Brian Schmidt is the Sales Solution Architect for Arctic IT's tribal government and tribal enterprise customer. Brian has spent the past 6 years implementing the tribal platform's enrollment and other business applications in Indian country and has emerged as an industry leader in cloud-based and on-premise solutions for Native American organizations. Rob Jacobs is a Tribal Client Services Manager for Arctic IT. Rob has a decade of experience working in Indian country business, serving in casino player development and marketing, and a consultant with the National Indian Gaming Association, National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development, Alaska Native and Tribal 8A companies, and the Presidential Administration regarding Indian energy and Indian affairs. As a reminder, this session will be recorded for unlimited future viewing, and you can find it on TribalWise.com. Participants are muted, but please send us your questions in the chat box for review at the end. And stay tuned for details following this webinar on how to join the security information sharing conversation that we're now enjoying within Tribal Hub. With that, I will turn it over to Brian and Rob.
Good morning, and thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I appreciate the lead-in and brief description of our past history. So welcome to everyone, and we've got myself, Brian Schmidt, and Rob Jacobs from Arctic IT that will be presenting today. So Rob, if you want to take it away.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Brian. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I see we have some amazing tribal representation out there. So we're very honored to have you guys on the call today. And if you will, we can go to the next slide, sir, and I'll kind of go over, who we are and what we do. The webinar's agenda I want to go over is who we are, challenges tribes face, the modern solution, and the call to action. Arctic IT was formed over 15 years ago up in Fairbanks, Alaska. And as you know, anything in Alaska, you have to be pretty tough to pull off. And actually, our slogan is tenacious ingenuity. And we use that tenaciousness to grow in Indian country and go in Alaska. Our client experience, we are, work with over 51 tribe and Alaska villages across the U.S. We specialize in technology for government and casinos. As a matter of fact, we're Microsoft's go-to partner for the implementation of their technology in the tribal space. We're a longtime partner of Tribal Hub. And like I said, we're Alaska Native owned by Doyen Limited, which is the largest Alaska village in Alaska. And they represent over 18,000 Alaska Native shareholders. And we are a proud Gold Microsoft partner, as I spoke to earlier, and that's very hard to achieve. Some of the challenges that many tribes face: siloed systems. As you heard there, I used to, work in tribal housing and tribal programs for tribal North Carolina. And siloed systems is, you have data across the departments. You have one tribal department that has their stuff on the server, and then you have another one over here that has their stuff on a different computer. That's what we mean by siloed systems. Duplicate data. We have tribal members come in and do an application for one program, then they go to another department and do another application for another program. That's what we mean by duplicate data. Manual processes. Manual processes, they handwrite most of their applications when they take these applications, and those, doing that, you have a lot of mistakes and you can have a lot of problems there. Insufficient reporting. Your manual, is slow and often results in errors and inaccurate data. And you also have security issues. Loss of data could cost you millions. We had a tribe recently that we tried to help out. They went through a ransomware, and the ransomware took them a year to come back from and cost them $3 million, unfortunately. So that's some of the things that you face when you don't upgrade your systems. So now we have a poll question. So what are your tribe's biggest challenge? Please select one: siloed systems, duplicate data, manual processes, insufficient reporting, and security issues. We'll give you a few seconds to fill that out. Looks like there's a tie between manual processes and security issues.
Okay.
Yeah, here's some of the barriers of operational improvement. Me working in travel programs and in the travel space as long as I have, I know that change is very hard. Some of our people are at their desk and they've been doing the same thing for so long that they don't want to hear about any other solutions out there. And a lot of them don't talk to their departments. I know when I used to go to conferences for housing, I would come back with new information, but I wouldn't share that information with our energy department per se, or human resources people, or anybody that needed to know this information. So nobody knew about the new and exciting technology or new tactics out there in Indian country to help you grow. Also, we have council priorities, lots of financial competition. As well as I do, if you have tribal gaming or any other economic development activities going on, that those things take preference when it comes to investment by the tribe. Those are things we know, things that we can rely on, and so those pretty much take preference when it comes to upgrading any systems, or especially anything dealing with the tribal membership. Like I said, leadership is unaware. When I come back from conferences, it wasn't necessarily that we had to brief our tribal council what we learned, unfortunately, and a lot of tribes go through that. So the leadership they don't read the technical magazines, right? So they don't know about the new technology out there. So if they're not aware, they can't bring it to the forefront. And also they're technology averse. Some of our tribal council members, are older, and like I'm older, and they don't necessarily want to learn new technology. So if they don't know about it, then they don't think it's a priority, unfortunately. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Brian Smith.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. So talking about some of the siloed systems and how the different departments can work together, it's a really important for managing your member data to allow the data that is maybe stored in one, and like the enrollment department, for example, to be accessible and to streamline some of the data sharing from one department to the next. So I'll pick on a couple different scenarios here where the enrollment department would be the primary database of all who is an enrolled member, maybe their current address, their current demographic information, their employment income information is accessible to the enrollment people because it's built on top of a desktop solution. It's a process that they have implemented over a number of years, and they've been using that process and that solution, but it's maybe on their desktop or on a couple desktops. And if anyone else in other departments needs that information, they need to be able to, essentially the process today is to print out or export the information into an Excel spreadsheet and send that to other departments or people that are requesting it. And a scenario might be, the police department, right? The tribal police want to have a list of who is a tribal member, but all of a sudden now you got a spreadsheet that has personal information from the enrollment folks walking around on either a paper copy or in an Excel spreadsheet. And that's a potential security risk. And so that's a scenario where the information needs better security and accessibility from other potential users that would access that information. And the only time that data changes is typically when a member comes in, they change an address and they let the enrollment department know, or they need to come in to get a new tribal ID card. And they update their current information, and then it gets printed on their ID card, and then sometimes that update doesn't happen again for another 2 years. So that's where some of the manual processes of keeping their information current and their addresses and so forth is very limited to within that department, and it's not shared across the two different areas. So now switching over to the Family Services Department, they've got their own confidential information, maybe some of their medical data, who is their provider, eligibility for different programs, so forth. But they need to know, is this individual that walked in for services, are they a tribal member or not? Well, today they either look to a spreadsheet or they make a phone call or go through some manual process to confirm that the individual truly is a tribal member and then is eligible for those services. So that was where the separation or the boundary between two departments is a frustration for the tribal member, because in some cases they may need to re-enter their contact information manually, or they got to fill out another form, or they got to prove their eligibility. That's a really big frustration for the tribal member. And they say, well, I just entered this earlier today because I had to go renew my ID card. Why do I have to enter it again to get services from your department? So that's an element of how you can improve the services for your tribal members by getting these departments to work together. And the same thing for an education department. If you're providing education services for enrolled members, there again, they may have confidential information around, is the eligible child and the relationship between the child and the guardian or the parent. And there again, they're refilling the same registration information over and over again that they've provided elsewhere, where in reality, that common information is already been in the system, and it could be shared between these departments. So that's a key area where having a single member managed database can streamline some of these processes and ease the frustration from the standpoint of the tribal member. And that's one of the goals that we're trying to achieve here. So the other element here is the common process between tribes. So with an enrollment solution, for example, you might have, what we've tried to do is build out a software and a technology that is tribe independent, even though different tribes have different criteria for what it means to be a member. So the software needs to be configurable to allow you to enforce the policies and the rules that your tribal council and your constitution that your tribal council have adopted, but then be able to allow that criteria to change over time as your tribe requirements change. So that's a challenge for a software provider to make sure that it's built in such a way that it can be adaptable to the different tribes and their specific requirements, whether they provide per capita distribution or not, and they want to be able to assess whether individuals are participating in an education program or they're receiving housing from the housing department. So there's using a common member master database is a way for the tribal council and the enrollment department to work together to make sure that they're collaborating and providing consistent services across the different departments. And Rob, do you have an example that you could share with us in your history?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like there was a lot of fraud involved. Most people got privy to the information, it's all public knowledge of what requirements are needed to qualify for certain programs. So, okay, if you had the income and you had 3 people in your household and you had a cousin that had a child, that give you the Social Security number and you could put that child down, and now all of a sudden you qualify for these programs. But the problem is, you might qualify for my program, I approve you, you go to the energy department and they have a different criteria, you don't have to use that child, right? But then somebody else comes in and uses the same child, the actual parent of the child, and then they get approved. So there's no trigger there, especially if you're doing manual applications, to say, oh, by the way, this child is in this other household. And and I've seen situations where the same child was used 3 or 4 times in different households. Or you're not, other people that weren't even related to the people. So this really helps you on the fraud. And of course, if you're dealing with housing, the HASA comes in and does audits, you want to be able to show that you don't have this kind of fraud going on. So, and it's very hard to do when you have a filing system and manual processes.
Yep. Thanks for that input, Rob. That's a great story, and that's one of the policies that you might want to say. We want to enforce that scenario of a child only being claimed in one household, and providing proof, and you can use the software or the system to help you enforce those policies, even as new staff member come in or you replace staff. Making sure that those policies are consistent, are being applied consistently is really important. Okay, so what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about some of the current models and solutions that are available, and introduce an example of one that can be used to help you manage your member database. So a master member database provides a central delivery for services that you provide to your enrolled members, whether that be from housing, education, enrollment, but having that common database that has touches within each of those departments becomes a really key mechanism to be able to say, all right, I'm managing the common data model, the common elements, whether that be their name, address, tribal affiliation, their blood quantum rules, the relationships that they have with different departments, or do they have a relationship with a housing department or the family services department, and being able to collect all that information into one place while applying some really key data security and confidentiality rules. That is a key element of a solution such as this, is to make sure that only those people that should have access to the member database can view the information that they need to do their job or to assess their eligibility for education example, but see nothing more. So for example, if a member is coming in and they're receiving family services from their family and child services, maybe a domestic violence situation has occurred, that's a very private and confidential event and services you're providing to that member. You don't want any of the other departments to know that service, that domestic situation is being managed by the family service department. But yet you still want the other departments to know that yes, this person is a member of the tribe, and they are receiving services from the family services group. But the education department doesn't need to know any of the details of what's actually happening there. So it's really important to be able to not only collect all the core information, and that's the idea behind the common data model. Having a common set of fields and information that's consistent, that can be used not only by the enrollment department, but also across that can be shared with the other departments as well. And then being able to assess applications for different programs. And I've been asked multiple times for assistance programs. They want to be able to assess which assistance programs an individual may be eligible for, not which ones that they've actually applied to participate in. So it's important to not only make the tribal members aware of what's available to them, but also be able to assess which programs they actually are participating in, and then be able to share notes across the different departments so they can see that, hey, this individual had a family issue, and they want to be able to share that personal piece of tidbit of information across the other departments, so they are aware, maybe a death in the family or something, that they're going through a period of grief. Who knows what that is, as an example. Okay. And then of course, the business rules and workflow. That's the element that really supports the enforcing the cross-department policies, or even the policies within a department. And then also being able to support workflows such as notification. So let's say a key piece of information that the enrollment department collects is that their main address, their primary address has changed. They want to be able to communicate that address change across to the other departments. Workflows can be set up to provide that notification so that the other departments can either update their own information or just be aware of changes like that. So it's something that can be very easily configurable, and that's what you should expect in the modern systems that are available to you to provide that as a capability for your team. And then of course, reporting and analytics. What is the point of having a member database if you can't get needed information out of it? So that's where if there's information that you want to provide either for your department or the tribal council wants to be able to assess participation in different programs, or how many tribal members received family services in the last year. If you're being frequently asked questions like that, having a member master database is a core concept to support that ability across your organization. Now, the administration of this information can be a shared responsibility across the different departments, and it can unify those business processes that you have. So you can apply the rules, and those security permissions and so forth can be adaptable to your what is allowed within your organization. And that's where we use, for example, mobile devices. Using the modern multi-channel adaptable applications. And what we mean by that is you can access this information from any device, anytime, anywhere. And that's a key solution for example, like I mentioned, the tribal police. They may want a purpose-built mobile application that will allow them to have access to just the information that they need to do their job, maintaining the security and the confidentiality of the data, but yet being able to support them and their ability to perform their job. And this system needs to be scalable and flexible so that as your tribe grows or your membership grows and your needs, you want to add in new programs or be able to add a new department in the future. You need a system that will be able to easily incorporate that new capability and while maintaining the security and the processes that you're already using today. So it's a really important element that, and this isn't, the administration of this data isn't just the responsibility of IT. This is a responsibility for everybody in each of the departments to make sure that they're protecting that information and keeping it current and contributing data for others to be able to leverage. And such as
Brian,
things. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate on the mobility of the application, and I'm just thinking we used to do outreach events like at the powwows for my tribe back home, and if we wanted to do like, okay, you can come up and update your applications, right? So if you had your team there at the powwow or any other outreach event, the client could come in and just update the record right there. Hey, we moved, we had a new tribal member, we need to add to the enrollment. You can do all that in any outreach event outside of your organization as well. So it doesn't have to be in your office.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a key scenario that will really benefit the tribal members because you're making your services more convenient to them when they're available, rather than forcing them to make a special trip to come visit your department. So it's a service that you're providing, and how can you streamline that service? Okay, so what I want to do now is switch gears and do a quick demo, just as an example of a possible solution of how this can be delivered from the way you maybe are doing it today. So let me pull that up. So what I've got is an application that is, you can see that I'm actually running inside a browser. This is a hosted solution that is available to you as long as you have an internet connection, whether it be on a phone or in an office. I can be on a laptop, I can be on a phone. And as long as I've got internet connection and I log in and authenticate myself as a person that has access to this data, then I can log in and get in here. So I can provide dashboards of key information, how many people are in each demographic group, and these are very easy to adjust. These graphics and the core information of frequent questions that you get every day. These dashboards can be easily updated, but then of course, from a member master database, this is that one view that shows not only, and granted, this is all just fake data. This is all made up information, but it can store not only just your members, member information showing their status and which tribe they're a member of, maybe their tribal ID and some core demographics about them, but you can also manage the non-members that are in the system. And the reason you might want that is because you want that non-member that has a relationship. Maybe it's a spouse of a member, and you want to be able to print that Brad is a spouse, but he's a non-member on a family tree chart. So it's really important to be listing which ones are non-members, and I can use views like this to be able to say, okay, I want to show just those people that are members of the tribe. I want to filter out all the people that are non-members. In the past, that was actually running a report to go print this out and then take a look at it. Where now, literally, I can use this as just a different view, and I'm looking at the information live, and it's filtering the information on just the criteria. So I want to filter out any of those that have recently passed away or have passed away in the past, and I want to see that report, and then I could take that information and kick that out to Excel. So I can then, if I do want to manipulate that information in some way, I can get that out here, do some additional reporting, filter it, provide it as needed for other departments to be able to access and use. So that's a really key integration scenario with the Office suite to be able to manipulate this information in a very flexible way. So I'll show an example of now. This is where you dive into an individual contact. So this is their name, their social security number. Now, notice here a key scenario from a security standpoint. I'm logged in as an enrollment administrator. So because this key is shown here, it means that there's field level security. So I, by default, because I'm in enrollment, I have access to her record, but then because I'm an administrator, I have full access to her social security. But if I'm not in maybe another department, we don't want them to see their full social security number. We only want them to see their last 4 digits. So that is a way that you can filter the information and make the only the security information or confidential information visible to the people that should have access to it. And you should expect that of any of the solutions you're using for software to provide this ability to filter and hide information that is personal identifiable information that is very sensitive to the individual. So that can be extended to their marital status, their household makeup. We can track their household that they're a member of, whether they're the head of household or if they're a spouse of the head of household, and be able to track their birth records, death records, their age, what age group that they're in. And these are all data elements that you can use for reporting and being able to answer questions for the tribal council. And then, of course, you want to be able to see their tribal affiliation. If Alicia is a member, which tribe is she a member of? And there's her status and what's her ID. And then you can actually see their blood quantum fraction. And then you can see that you can now drill into additional address information. Current solution should allow you to have this ability to manage multiple addresses for an individual, whether that be a seasonal address or a home address, or let's say that Alicia was incarcerated for some reason. You could add a new address type that would be a temporary address while she's actually incarcerated. So there's multiple different ways that these new tools can provide that and help you manage the information related to the individual. And you should expect that from the current tools, because this is a key requirement for you to be able to keep this historical information about the individual. Plus being able to track their committee membership, their aliases, or maybe their education and skills and certificates that they currently have. Maybe you want to track their emergency contacts, so you can have this available for a child, for example, that might be in the school, so that you can have the emergency contact be the parent. Tracking their employment, if they're employed at an employer, what's their, and it show their history of their employment. But also be able to track their relationships. So this information is what you would use, for example, to be able to build like a family tree. So that's why you can see all this, the information in one dashboard. And now what I want to do is quickly switch gears and change now. I'm looking at this view, and then one more thing before I switch. Let me go look at Alicia's member profile. So the idea behind this is confidential information that only the enrollment department should have access to. So for example, you can see now that the tribe is editable. It's no longer locked like this, meaning that, okay, and as an enrollment director or enrollment manager, I can actually make changes to their tribal affiliation. I can make changes to their member status, whether they're a member, non-member, or pending. I can enter records around their change request. So if I'm either applying for approval to be a member, or I'm relinquishing my membership, this is where I would manage that information. And then of course being able to drill in and look at the blood quantum details for the individual, so that I can say, all right, here's Alicia's biological mother and biological father, and I should be able to mark whether that biological parent is actually confidential. So that might be confidential in the scenario where it was an adoption scenario. So maybe the mother was give up Alicia for for adoption, and we want to keep the father as a confidential piece of information, then that can be hidden from any of the reporting that would happen from the system. And this is all information then that you can then say, all right, other departments, you cannot see who their biological father is because they are marked confidential, and that's how you can protect that information for the individual. Okay, so again, that's the idea behind a structure or a tool such as this, is to be able to provide this security and configure the security based on your role. So now I'll switch gears, and now I'm going to simulate the scenario where I'm a family wellness. I'm actually a family and child services administrator or caseworker. So I can now see, all right, if I click on that contact list, I see the same list. It's the same list of people, and I'm looking at that shared information. But I might not have access to maybe their employment information or their incarceration. I don't see that information, and that's an element that's configurable, right? Because as an enrollment person, I may not only need to be able to edit it, but I want to be able to view it as well. But let's say, for example, that you don't want the family and child services people to see that information, you can easily hide that. And that's where the modern tools provide that capability and flexibility to be able to restrict the visibility of certain data elements from what they should and should not see. Okay, and then vice versa. So now let's dive into their client profile. So again, I'm the family and child services member, and I'm going to drill into the information that is protected and confidential only for the services that I'm providing to Alicia. So again, you can see that this is all locked, meaning I can't edit this, but I'm pulling it just by the fact that I pulled her name. I can see all this shared information that is important for me in the Family and Child Services Department to have access to. So now I can look at their profile. And again, this could be details, and this is very configurable to allow you to add information that you as a Family and Child Services Department want to be able to manage, but yet it's confidential, specific to your department and the services you provide. So then this is where you might see the medical information, their provider, who is their primary medical facility that they go to, or their primary pharmacy that they work with. But then we can drill into like the case plans. So let's say, for example, or let's start out here. Let's start out here as one of these service requests. This would be as similar to an intake that you would collect for an individual. And she's coming in looking for employment assistance. So then you can assess their eligibility based on their age or the program that you defined. And then you can say whether they're eligible for that. And then you can summarize, maybe provide their income summary, but they can't see any of the details of their income. And that's an important data point, is that you'll notice that on their contact record, I didn't see anything about their income. But at a minimum, I might be able to just see their summary income and expense detail. That's where the security of the data comes into play, to make that visible to only the information that you need access to. Okay, so and again, I'm just bringing these scenarios up as an example of what these tools should allow you to do. So you can use this as a way to define who is a family group, and now you're providing counseling services to this individual, and you can actually then drill in and look at a graphic of all the services that are not only being provided on that case plan, but maybe if you're involving the family group or the other family members in this counseling or family situation. These tools should provide mechanisms to give you filtering and navigation and easy ways to access this information. And if you want to expose this data to another department, it's very easy to configure it to support that scenario. So again, I wanted to just quickly give you a quick brief walkthrough of how some of these solutions can provide this capability. and what you should expect from these new tools.
Ryan,
All
this
right.
is Rob. I just wanted to, if you could go over this, how customizable this is, how easy it is to customize. And I'm thinking
Yep.
of our tribal client we had that needed to apply for an ICWA grant, Indian Child Welfare Act grant. And it was a substantial amount, but she needed 500 different data points to fill that grant out. And if you were doing that, manually, it would take you forever to gather that information. And using our system, she was able to go in there and just run the report she needed for all those 500 data points and fill out for the grant, which she successfully won. But she had to go in there and we had to put a different module in to manage that grant. And if you can go over how easy that is and how they don't need our help to do that per se.
Yep, that's another key element is these new tools are built on platforms that are highly configurable, that can be built as a purpose-built applications to provide information in a secured way. But adding fields and adjusting labels or any of that information related to it, that should be something you should expect from any of the solutions that you use to manage your member database, to make sure that it provides that ability for your department to provide those services. Absolutely, good point, Rob. All right, so let's move on and talk a little bit about a call to action and what we want to achieve. So from here, I think it's really important that, now that you've attended this seminar, you understand that technology has grown a lot over the last, let's say, 10 years. Platforms and the tools have become much more integrated, easier to use, and there's been a dramatic improvement that you can actually make streamline processes within your tribe as you provide those services. So it's going to be important for you to take this information and now work with your leadership, right, to be able to say, hey, there's better ways that we can manage this information versus the way we've done it for maybe the last 10 plus years. So we should at least open the idea of investigating and doing a search on how we can provide a member master database that can be usable by multiple departments, and then working to educate the department staff, right? So it's not only the tribal leadership, this isn't just a top-down thing. You should be working with your peers in other departments to say, hey, there's a better way that we can work together to achieve these goals and streamline some of these common complaints that we receive from tribal members when they come in to receive services. And then being able to educate yourself as well, because, to be honest, we're constantly educating. We're in the IT business and we're constantly learning all the new technology and reporting and platforms that are constantly available. But that's why we can partner with you. Companies like ours can partner with you to help jumpstart and provide recommendations based on the fit for what your department is doing and where your goals or your strategic goals are to improve the services that you provide. And then, obviously working on building cross-department and cross-tribe relationships. If you interact with other tribes or sister tribes, that can be a mechanism where you can streamline some of that data sharing between your tribes, if that's applicable. If not, that's fine. But it is something that would be available to you in these new processes. And then, of course, developing standards. It's interesting because every tribe that we work with is slightly different, has different process policies and rules in place. And sometimes it's helpful just for tribes to even document the processes and the standards that they have in place already, if they're not documented outside the Constitution. So it's really, really important to try and standardize and streamline and come to agreement on how those processes can help you and your tribal members. But then obviously working with somebody like Arctic IT as a partner, we can help you evaluate what are the options. And if the technology that we have is not a fit, we're absolutely going to tell you that we can't help you or make a recommendation with someone that could help you. So this isn't all about our organization, trying to get business relationship with you. It's about helping you provide services to your members, and that's at the end of the day, that's what really matters. So with that, I think I will hand it back.
Hi, this is Chuck. We have a few questions for you guys. You know, you've got, and it was a great webinar. We appreciate all the information. Just some general questions. You know, a platform like this, is there a sweet spot as far as the tribe size or how much a tribe can afford? So is this something that all tribes can use, small tribes, large tribes? Is it affordable for the smaller tribes? Can you address some of that?
Yep, absolutely. So this solution and a solution like what we've shown you today is something that we've proposed this to tribes that are a few hundred members, and we propose this to tribes that have tens of thousands of members. And that's one of the beauties of using a platform that is highly scalable. Is that it can grow from a small tribe and limited or not only limited services, but limited number of people in the database, but be able to share that information across the different departments, but be able to say, okay, as if I am engaging other departments, I want to have a larger number of people that could enter information and maintain it, and that affects the pricing as well. The fewer number of people that are maintaining the information, let's say you have one or two people in your tribal enrollment department, and they're managing all the information for a few hundred members, you may only need, then you would only need to pay for those two people. And it's a per user cost to use a system. So it can be relatively inexpensive to have access once it's set up and configured for what you're trying to do. And then as for larger tribes, you know, you may have dozens or maybe, you know, 40, 50 members, or I mean staff people that would actually have access to the software. So you're going to pay that per user cost to have access to the data. And the prices are relatively low compared to the value that can be provided. And think about it from the standpoint of not only the per user cost on a monthly basis, think about the time savings and how much you spend every day or every week collecting all this information and sharing with the different groups. And if I could streamline or make those processes easier, how much time could it save you? So don't just think about it purely as a, you know, it's a cost to my tribe. Think about it as, if I'm saving myself time in managing the information, how can I better provide services in other ways to them? So that it is scalable to only the number of seats that you need for the size of your tribe and the number of people that need access to the data, but it can scale to the hundreds of thousands of tribal members if needed.
Excellent. So that you actually touched on.
Too.
Nope, go ahead.
It's also program scalable. So, you know, you can start with enrollment. Then if you want to bring in family wellness, and if you want to bring in tribal energy, and even if you want to bring in burial services, I mean, you could add these modules and just keep growing and growing and growing. And you can also apply for grants, like I mentioned earlier, different grants now, because you have the capability to run these reports, which will bring more money to the organization, which will even make this less expensive for you.
Right. Exactly.
So those are great points, and that kind of leads into the next question, guys. Obviously, if you're going to implement every one of those departments and groups that you just mentioned, it's quite the length of time, but I assume that you can implement one group to begin with and build on that over time. So with that in mind, how fast can somebody get up and running?
So it's a great question, and it's obviously really important to plan out that usage for a system such as this, because, you know, enrollment is kind of the center, right? They're kind of that hub, and that in the past they manage all that core data today. So it's not unusual for us to be able to say, what system are you using today? And in some cases, some tribes are literally using Excel or an Access database or something really, really simple to manage their tribal members. What we do is the hardest part of that project is saying, okay, let's look at the system. Let's make sure all the data elements are there for what you're tracking, and then take their current data and get that imported. So it's scrubbing that data that you already have today from your current database, and then getting that so that it's accurate and the correct list of people that should be in the system, and then importing that data. And it's not uncommon to get started from at least an enrollment perspective to have that done in a 3-month time frame, right? From getting started, having some quick meetings, some walkthroughs, importing the data, doing some training, and doing some acceptance, and then getting up and running and going live. And from that point, once you have that enrollment solution in place, now that becomes a springboard to then say, what is that next department? What is that next important process? Whether it's a family and child services, is it education? Is it per capita, payments? What you tell me which one is the next priority that could benefit from having and having access to that member master database.
That's
And
great.
that's a phased implementation that we will absolutely, work with each individual tribe to plan out that progression.
Well, I think everyone would agree. Getting something like this up and running in 3 months is a great time frame.
Yep.
So
Yep.
with that in mind, how much effort does it require from the administrator? So you touched on that. Is it one administrator that you need for every 1,000 people? Does it scale a certain way? What have you seen?
Usually, from what I've sold the product before, and usually they just need one administrator. Tribal enrollment officers are pretty small, have fewer than 10 employees, so you only need really one administrator to manage the system.
Excellent.
And they have like a couple of licenses for individual employees working on the system, but yeah.
And that's the idea, is that having a member system database such as this, you can make it easier to not only update the current data that's in the system, but what is that thing that takes the most time? If you're fielding calls from other departments, asking questions about the tribal members, if there's a mechanism where they could go in and look up the information themselves, all of a sudden those phone calls go away and you're providing better service to the other departments. So it's looking at other business processes of how you, what are the things that are taking time today from your enrollment team, and how can we streamline or self-serve the information? And that's another element that I didn't point out earlier, is that these new tools and platforms have the ability to allow tribal members to self-service. They can update their own information through a secured portal if that's permissible. And that's really up to the policy of the tribe, but being able to have a portal to allow individual members to update their address information or their contact information, or put in an application for services through a web portal, that is a new capability that really will streamline the interaction that you have with your tribal members. That literally within the last 5 years, that wasn't even an option for many tribal members and other solution providers.
Yeah, and security with that, I'll speak about one of our clients that has this. The person at home, tribal member, updates their address, for instance. Well, that pings the administrator or pings the employee at the tribe. Hey, this person changed their information. Do you approve? Then you look at it and then you approve it. It's not like they can do this stuff and it automatically goes in. You have to approve it, but that's like a security parameter.
And you can actually require that they, in that situation, if they're going to change their address, maybe you require them to upload or scan and provide a utility bill proving that this is their current address. You can enforce that, hey, you can't change your address unless you actually attach a scanned file as proof of address that can be reviewed. So there again, you're enforcing the policies on the individual and putting the responsibility back on them to meet the rules.
Yeah, you raise an important point, Brian. You can store all that information in their record. Light bill, utility bill, birth certificates, all that stuff can be stored right in that record. So this is a long way away from the old folder days of housing, where you had a folder, you had to put all that stuff in, and then HUD would come in and audit that whole entire folder, and then it might end up on my desk for 3 or 4 days. Interview department was looking for it. I forgot I had it. So, it's just a lot of clutter, a lot of inefficiencies. This makes your total process way more efficient, quicker, and you won't need as many people to implement this.
Yep.
Sounds good, guys. That's all the questions that we have. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we sign off today?
No, I really appreciate everyone's attendance, and I look forward to, if our contact information is available from the webinar. So if you're ever interested in doing a deeper dive and taking a look at your tribe specific scenario, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we would definitely love to have a conversation with you.
Well, Brian and Rob, we certainly want to say thanks. And as everyone saw on the previous slide, we've got 2 more webinars coming up with Arctic. I would encourage everyone to go out and register for those. And again, thanks, Brian and Rob, for the webinar today. It was excellent.
Thank you.
Everybody that's still on, I'd like you to take a look. We have a tribal industry security discussion group that is in its early stages. And security is obviously a huge concern for everybody, across the globe these days, but certainly as well in the Native American organizations. So if you're interested in joining, we would ask you to contact us. It's very simple. Shoot us an email at contactus@tribalhub.com. And mark on your calendar, as I mentioned, we've got a lot of webinars coming up. We've actually got webinars scheduled throughout the end of the year. We're going to have 30 webinars this year, and we'd love to hear and see all of you at each and every one. Our next couple webinars on February 4th, Protecting Tribes and Their Entities from Cyber Attacks and Breaches. That'll be hosted by Nutanix. And then we've got 2 by Arctic IT on February 13th and March 12th. Phishing attack prevention for tribes and procurement and inventory for government, gaming, and tribal enterprise. As always, go to TribalWise.com to register and see a list of all of the upcoming webinars, because we have these and many more. So again, this is Chuck Scharnagel. I want to say thank you for joining us today and remind you that we're here to meet all of your educational needs. If you have any questions about training, we have many solutions available and would love to talk to you about it. So again, it's been Chuck Scharnagel with TribalWise. Everyone have a great day, and we will see you on February 4th.